All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the first episode of what I'm calling Mashpocalypse, my brand new podcast. I'll level with you, I didn't think that I would be starting a new podcast today, but the universe has decided that that's what's going on. For those of you who are not aware, recently, for me around 24 hours, but it may be further when you're watching this, YouTube had a falling out with the company CSAC, and CSAC is an artist representation company that essentially is in charge of things like... I'll be honest, I don't really know what CSAC does, but I do know what happened yesterday. They chose not to renew their contract with YouTube, and as a result, in the United States, we lost access to a lot of music. We lost Nirvana, Green Day, Bob Dylan, Adele, the list goes on. And all of those artists' videos are blocked. You can't watch them. And that has affected a lot of the mashup channels, including myself, because you need to sample a lot of different artists. And chances are, just by sheer number of things that you've sampled, chances are you've sampled a CSAC artist at some point. And in my case, and in the cases of just about everybody I know, we've lost something as a result. In my case, about half my discography. But it's not all doom and gloom, because some of my albums survived. In fact, the three most recent albums of mine survived, which I think is incredibly reassuring, because those are the albums that have the most fandom behind them, I would say. But the fact of the matter is, I was planning to release a new one next month. That may not happen because of this situation. But I still need something to do to occupy my time, and I figured a cool thing to do that might provide a little entertainment, maybe even a little hope to people living in the Mashpocalypse, is to go back to the albums that I've already released, the ones that CSAC has not flagged and blocked, and just go back through them, re-listen for the first time in a while, and just go track by track, and I'll just tell whatever stories come to mind, see if there's any cool things going on that you may not have known, and we'll just get started. By the way, this is not going to be an album commentary. I'm not going to be talking over the album, because that is a ridiculously hard thing to do, to have someone talking in your ear and then you're trying to talk to someone else. I thought about doing that. I may have even attempted to do that in the past, and it's just not the kind of thing that I'm good at. So sorry if that's what you were expecting. But let's get started with the first track, which is Take Me Down. I think this is one of my most underrated openers. I mean, this thing is something that I'm very proud of. I managed to do some stuff on here that I probably would not have been capable of even a few months before this album's release. The main thing that comes to mind for me is the Martin Garrix sample, Animals. That was like half a week of my real life spent trying to figure out how to make that happen, because that song, it's so many beats, one after the other, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and getting that to sync up perfectly to the instrumental is way harder than you would think. Because every beat is so quick after the previous. If you make a mistake, if it's not synced up perfectly, then you're going to lose like most of that sample. It's just not going to sync up right, and it's just going to be noticeable, and the kind of thing that people will absolutely point out in the comments, or at the very least, they'll quietly turn off the video. It's very important that you hook your audience with that first track, so I really like to have strong openers when I can. And Take Me Down, I mean, that one just, aside from Animals, which was a bit of a challenge, the rest of the samples came together in a way that I think was really fun and natural, and created a really cool, interesting vibe for the rest of the project. Moving ahead a little bit to track 2, Overtime. Now this is going to be a fun story. So towards the end of the track, there's a sample that to the uninitiated may appear to be from Shakira's This Time for Africa, aka Waka Waka, one of the greatest song titles ever, in my opinion. But it's actually not from that, because I wanted to use the Shakira version, but what I realized was if I had done that, I would have had two options, which would have been pitch it up so that it sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks on helium, or pitch it down so that it sounds like your sleep paralysis demon. Neither would have really sounded good to me. But what I realized was Shakira had actually sampled a different song from the 80s, and that song was a lot closer and a lot easier to pitch correct. So once I got that song, I had to begin the process of isolating it, because it's such an obscure song that nobody's ever, obtained an isolated vocal track. So I had to do that myself, and that was still tough, but nothing compared to like Animals on the first track. But the funny thing is, this may end up being one of the more obscure samples in my discography, because, have any of you listened to the original song? Do you know the name of the artist? I sampled it, and I don't remember, so I guess you tell me. But yeah, besides that, pretty standard mashing process on Overtime. Overtime, I think, is exactly what it needed to be. It was a logical continuation of the first track to the point where it's even in the same key, but it has a different energy, and because of how sort of chill and relaxed it is, it makes the next track stick out all the more, which is what I was hoping for when I made it. I was looking forward to the reactions on track 3, Do It Wrong. I wanted this track to sort of be a question mark and get people thinking, like, what the hell is going on here? It was just fun. It was just fun. And that is in part because of the fact that I mashed up Paramore, a band that I really like and a lot of people really like, with our good friend Adam Levine from Maroon 5, who is not that at all. I will say, though, this Maroon 5 song, Maps, I have a bit of nostalgia for this one. Not because I like the song, but because I have good memories associated with it. Whenever my mom would pick me up from summer camp in the summer after that song was released, that song would always play at least once. And there's a lot of songs on this album that have that same connotation for me. I was sort of looking at, when I made the album in general, the Mandela series by TC Music, in terms of these are a lot of songs that carry strong memories for us, but now they're in a different context. And Am I Wrong, which is also something that I sampled on this track. That's another good example of a song where I was like, it was omnipresent in my memory, and then it just vanished off the charts and nobody thinks about it anymore, except for me, because I had that sort of sponge absorption going on in my brain at that time. But as a result, I think that Do It Wrong ended up being exactly what I wanted. This sort of strange hodgepodge of sounds that I created to be as weird and off the cuff as possible. And I think that if you look at the chat replay on that video when I was premiering it, you will see a lot of confused reactions, which is what I was going for. Yeah, very fun track. One of my favorite to make for sure. But we haven't reached my number one favorite yet. We'll come back to that. Moving forward, we got track 4, Weapons Make Trouble. Here's a fun one. Not the track, but rather a story that comes to mind with it. I wanted the title to be Trouble with Weapons, or The Trouble with Weapons. And for whatever reason, even though that is not a much bigger word, phrase rather, than Weapons Make Trouble, it would not fit on the screen in the video. So I had to change the title to one that is clunkier, I think, just to make sure that the video would work. That's the kind of sacrifices you can expect me to make for art. Yeah. Sorry. No, but this track is honestly my least favorite, probably, because, the combo is good. The Taylor Swift vocal over the Ava Max, I think, instrumental. I think that works, and it does its job, but I'm not somebody who is terribly impressed by mashups with only 2 samples anymore. I mean, no disrespect to the people whose bread and butter that is, but for me personally, the novelty is worn off a little bit. And I mean, I was feeling that as I was making this, and out of pure desperation, I added the drum fill from In the Air Tonight just to say that I had 3 samples on this track, when in reality it was 2 samples and then 5 seconds of Phil Collins. But for whatever reason, I have decided, I guess at some point I must have made this decision, that the Phil Collins drum thing is going to happen once on every album I've made after the fact. If you listen to Boom Tube or Invisible City or this new project that'll hopefully be out once this Mashpocalypse is over, you'll find Phil Collins. He's hiding in there. You just got to be smart enough to locate him. But other than that, I don't have a ton to say on this track because there isn't really a ton going on. But again, that's something that I decided never again to allow to happen. I have a rule now where I won't release a mashup unless it has 4 samples or more. And the reason behind that is also a bit of copy protection. One thing that happens a lot, and it's definitely happened to me, is that someone independent of you will come up with the same idea for a mashup, and maybe their channel is bigger, or maybe the algorithm picks it up at the right time, but their mashup gets all the views even though you were first. It's like when a kid says your joke but louder in school and then everyone laughs. It's a really deflating feeling. And so my way of avoiding that is, if you have at least 4 samples or more, the odds that someone else is going to come up with the exact same idea decrease to the point where it's microscopic. The odds are just overwhelmingly in your favor that you will not encounter parallel thinking. And so as a result of that, Weapons Make Trouble is the last track to feature only 3 samples, I think, in my discography. I'm trying to I think that might not be correct. There might be some on Invisible City that have less. I have to double check that, but not right now. I got a podcast to record. Moving on to track 5, Broken Interlude. Now, this is a fun one. It started and ended abruptly on the album, but I think that just sort of launching into it worked in my favor because it was so out of left field. I was just like, here's what I'm doing, enjoy. And people did enjoy. One thing that I was very proud of was getting the Eminem sample on this to sync up with the other samples, the Maroon 5, the Rixton, I want to say, and obviously the What's Love instrumental. It was just this incredible lucky break, and then I was just done with that track, and so are we. Moving on to track 6, and the reason we're moving on so quickly is because, as I hinted before, this one's my favorite. You have this nostalgic instrumental, Somebody to You by the Vamps and Demi Lovato, which was a song that I heard a lot on the radio when it was initially released. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. But once I sort of rediscovered it as an adult, it really clicked with me in a way that it had not before. And I really wanted to make it the instrumental to something. And then I, of course, noticed that it was in the same key as Fireflies, which in my line of work means that you put Fireflies over it. But also, this is the point in the album where something that I was going through in real life starts to manifest in the track list, which was a frankly incredibly upsetting time in my life where I was just suffering from the worst insomnia of my life. I've struggled with insomnia for almost as long as I've been alive, but this was like a really rough patch for me. It got to the point where I had to take a leave of absence from college because I was just not sleeping. And when you don't sleep, things don't get done during the day. And that was where I realized when I was making this track, Fireflies, Anti-Hero, Tonight Tonight, the three main vocals on it, if you put them together, it creates this strange story of insomnia. And I realized that I could link this track to my real life experience, and that was an incredibly moving thing for me to be able to do. I, until this point, had never attempted anything like that. That sort of everything is wonderful or rose-tinted glasses sort of thing where you are drawing on lived experience, but doing it through pre-existing samples. I mean, that's something that I had never dipped my toes into until Awake Tonight, which is why it's my favorite track. I think it was a breakthrough moment for me where I sort of determined that I was not any different from the mashup artists who were able to do similar things, where I realized that if I put my mind to it, I could find a way to wring similar emotions out through my mashups. And that was just an incredible feeling. And I think that the track reflects that. It does some very cool things with the Fireflies synth at the bridge, and I'm looking at the chat next to the album premiere, and in the immortal words of Hi, My Name is Shan, almost emotional. Almost emotional, guys. You heard it here first. Moving forward, we have track 7, Caught in the Light. This was something where I felt bad because when I would show it to people and the intro from Beyond by Daft Punk started playing, they were like, oh, it's going to be Daft Punk. It's going to be so cool. And then it's a bait and switch, and instead you're getting Ellie fucking Goulding. That was something where I was like, maybe I should have put a little more Daft Punk into this besides just a little bit that you get at the beginning and the end. This is the album where I really started to play around with Daft Punk the most. I literally left a comment, I think, in the premiere chat saying, can you tell I was into Daft Punk when I made this, or something along those lines. This track was so weird because I was not expecting it to come together at all. These samples just felt so random and not really connected to anything. And yet, once they were all together, Caught in the Light became just this oddly compelling groove that sort of wakes you up after Awake Tonight. Pun absolutely intended. Where it's just this sort of, you're jolted awake, and now we're doing this instead of marinating in the Awake Tonight sort of haze that comes from that. But as soon as this track ends, and this is a choice that I think is a little bit strange now looking back, once Caught in the Light is over, we're right back into that haze with Butterfly Boulevard, which is the first track that I made from this project. This was also the product of insomnia. I made this mashup at like 3 a.m. I was really tired, but when I eventually did conk out in the early hours of the morning and woke up during the day, I was surprised to find that it held up. It was a very simple combination, just an instrumental and a vocal with some slight accompaniment from the Black Parade piano towards the end. But I think this mashup, more than any, captured sort of that insomnia thing where, you're trudging along even though you're tired. And I think that was a really cool compliment to Awake Tonight. I really should have put these two back to back and then switched out Caught in the Light. That would have flowed better into tracks 9 and 10. But didn't notice it at the time, and people seemed to like it anyway. So as much as I could just sit here and shake my fist at my past self for doing things a certain way, I do think it worked out, and I still love this track very much. It's very simple, but very effective. And that's just really cool. Moving on to track 9, What the Heart Wants. This is where things start to pick up again for real. This is, as I put in the Premiere chat, which I have next to me again, this is the track that made YouTube decide to block the self-titled in 3 separate territories. And the reason for that, which artist did that? I mean, he even introduces himself. Jason Derulo. Yes, Jason Derulo. His people are very litigious. They were not thrilled that I used his vocals, which is surprisingly relevant thanks to this whole CSAC situation with the Mashpocalypse. Woohoo. No, but other than that, this track I think was also really good. It featured the Carmen instrumental. I don't know much about Carmen. I may not even be pronouncing their name right. All I know about this group is there's that video of the lead singer doing a live performance, and she just goes wah, 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 with her voice, and she does that for like a solid 30 seconds, making that sort of Blues Cluesy noise, and I have no context for it. It's just that perfect distillation of like early 2010s Zooey Deschanel energy. Okay, now hold on. Sorry for that weird cut in the audio. Future Ferro here. I just watched that performance. That was during a cover of Pumped Up Kicks. Can you fucking believe that? Oh my god. During a performance of Pumped Up Kicks, she just is, she's doing the blah, 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 blah. I cannot think of anything that makes less sense to do during a cover of Pumped Up Kicks. Oh my god. Well, that was not a tangent I expected to go on during this review of my mashup album. Oh man. What the Heart Wants is the name of this track that I was supposed to be talking about. I think it made for a very good penultimate track. I wouldn't say it was like great necessarily, though I do know people who think that. I think it was serviceable. It did its job. It got the energy up. It made sure that people would kind of pay attention again and start to build up the energy for the final track, The Sky is Falling. This is a track that has a very interesting beginning. I used the Avicii remix of Derez from Tron, which is another Daft Punk song. And that was not always the plan. The plan was that it was going to be the instrumental of Contact by Daft Punk. But then, right before, well, not right before, but decently close to the release date of this project, David Omario releases an album. And that album's closer uses the instrumental of Contact by Daft Punk. So I tell David, you fucked me over, as a joke, obviously. But yeah, that was a thing where I had to kind of think on the fly. And as a result, The Sky is Falling was created. It features a lot of the same samples that the original version would have had, but frankly, I think this worked out for the best, because I ran out of Firefly's lyrics to use, and so I was just repeating the chorus over and over again, and that would have gotten very annoying very fast, so I'm glad that we avoided that timeline. This is also the first instance... Yes, it's the first instance where I used Down by Jay Sean as a sample, and I would continue that on the following 2 albums because I like callbacks. I love callbacks. I do them all the time. There are so many samples that I have used more than once. On purpose, too. It's not just a thing where I have the same 6 songs in rotation. It's a thing where I like to call back to previous stuff. It rewards longtime listeners, and then when people do deep dives into my stuff, they notice parallels and that the albums kind of flow into each other. And maybe that's just... I mean, everybody knows I'm superhero themed. Maybe it's just a reflection of like cinematic universe stuff. I'm just so used to that kind of all is connected energy. But I mean, at the same time, you people go nuts when I use fireflies for the 100th time, so what do I know? I think that's gonna do it. I think I've said all I can say about all the tracks on this self-titled album of mine. But before I close out, there is one last story that I would like to tell, and it is not about any specific track on this album, but rather the album as a whole. You may have noticed that this is a self-titled album themed around the color blue. Now, I may have just triggered the sleeper agent activation code in your brain to access Weezer. I mean, it's a blue album. It's gonna make you think of Weezer, and I've sampled Weezer quite a bit. A lot of mashup artists do. They're very sampleable because they are very memeable. The funny thing is, this might be one of the only maybe 2 or 3 projects that I have ever released that doesn't sample Weezer once. I made a mashup album, colloquially known as the Blue Album, and I did not sample Weezer a single time. That was a choice. I chose to do that because I thought it would be funny, and no one picked up on it. But now you know. Now you know. Who says you can't learn something from an idiot with a microphone? Sorry, I just became soul-shatteringly self-aware in the last few seconds. That's going to do it for this first episode of Mashpocalypse. Please let me know if this is something you would like me to continue doing. Hopefully it won't be too long of a project in terms of the CSAC situation resolving soon, but after all, you can't spell CSAC without ass, so we'll see if they continue to make an ass of themselves. This has been Mashpocalypse. As always, I am your host, FerroLad. And, oh, I've got an idea. Why don't we have Carmen play us out?